Imagine it's 1973. A phone doesn't fit in your pocket. It's more like a hefty brick weighing over a kilogram. Yet in a Motorola lab that year, the first handheld mobile phone was born. What inspired its design? Not pure science, but science fiction. Engineer Martin Cooper has credited Star Trek for inspiring the mobile phone's concept. Specifically, the flip-open communicator used by Captain Kirk. That's what sparked Cooper's imagination. That's right, a gadget from a 1966 TV show helped give rise to the cell phone era. In this video, we'll beam up the true origin story of the cell phone and show how Star Trek helped create a piece of 21st century everyday life. Hold on to your flip phones, because the tale of how Star Trek changed our world is truly out of this world. We almost all use cell phones today, but their ancestor was a Star Trek prop. Back in the 1960s, on Star Trek the original series, the crew of the Enterprise used a small handheld communicator device to talk wirelessly whilst on away missions. It was the iconic flip-open gadget Captain Kirk would use to contact the ship. In reality, a decade later, in the early 1970s, engineers at Motorola were racing to invent the first portable mobile phone. One of them was Martin Cooper, often called the father of the cell phone. On April the 3rd, 1973, Cooper made the first ever handheld cell phone call, dialing his rival at Bell Labs from a New York City sidewalk. And guess what Cooper later revealed had inspired the design of that phone? Captain Kirk's communicator. Even Time magazine noted this connection, writing that while at Motorola, Cooper created the first personal cell phone, citing Captain Kirk's communicator on Star Trek as an inspiration. His prototype phone weighed around 28 ounces or 800 grams and was nicknamed the Brick. It was a chunky handheld device, not quite as sleek as a Starfleet communicator, but the idea of a wireless personal communicator came straight from science fiction. It's a perfect example of life imitating art. A technology imagined as fiction was turned into reality by skilled engineers. Now we're diving deeper into how a sci-fi idea became the gadget you might be using right now, and we've been watching this video on. And along the way, we'll share some of Cooper's own words and other evidence that Star Trek's tech vision has fueled real-world innovation. We'll also talk about that historic first phone call. Spoiler, it was to a stunned rival at AT&T, or Bell Labs, and how, of course, later cell phones, especially the flip phones of the 1990s, took design cues from Star Trek's communicator. Was the communicator almost magical? I mean, in a sense, yes. It helped spark the mobile communications revolution. The Star Trek origin of the cell phone, the direct link between Star Trek and modern cell phones, comes from one of mobile technology's pioneers. So Martin Cooper, working at Motorola, led the team that developed the first mobile handset in the early 1970s. He's often called the father of the cell phone, and for good reason. In interviews and publications, Cooper often acknowledged that Star Trek inspired him. The Time 2007 Best Inventions issue, for example, quotes that Cooper created the first personal cell phone, citing Captain Kirk's communicator on Star Trek as an inspiration. Cooper has mentioned that seeing Captain Kirk's lightweight communicator on TV made him envision people carrying smaller wireless devices in real life. In the 1960s, that idea seemed far-fetched, but to him it was a glimpse of the future. Back then, The only mobile phones were bulky car phones tied to vehicle batteries. Cooper and Motorola wanted to free the phone from the car to make it truly portable. Inspired by Star Trek, Cooper's team built a prototype handset called the Dynatac. It was 23 centimeters tall and weighed 1.1 kilograms, 2.5 pounds, a far cry from today's slim smartphones, but a remarkable leap for 1973. Cooper made his first call on that prototype on April the 3rd, 1973, famously calling Dr. Joel Engel, his competitor at AT&T, to announce that he was calling from a cellular phone. Imagine being on the other end of that call, hearing that the future has arrived. Cooper later joked that they nicknamed the prototype the Brick because of its size and weight. It had about 20 to 30 minutes of talk time before the battery died, but it worked. And it proved that truly mobile handheld telephony was possible. Time magazine reported that the first call on the 28-ounce phone was indeed to his Bell Labs rival, making for a triumphant tech demo. This real-world device uncannily resembled Kirk's communicator in concept, a personal handheld communicator that you could carry around. The communicator on Star Trek flipped open and had a wireless range via subspace. And while Cooper's phone didn't literally flip, the idea of a pocketable wireless communicator was very much the same. In fact, later cell phones did adopt the flip-open design, notably Motorola's own StarTAC phone in 1996, which intentionally echoed the name and style of Star Trek's gadget. Just as a sidebar, I actually owned a StarTAC as my first ever proper mobile phone, and I chose it because it looked like a Star Trek communicator. There you go. It's worth noting that science fiction influence on science, a fact, isn't always a straight line. Cooper and others had been working on wireless communication long before 1973. Bell Labs had cellular network concepts as early as 1947. And Motorola was motivated to compete with AT&T in the late 60s. Interestingly, Cooper revealed in his 2021 memoir that his earliest inspiration was actually the two-way radio wristwatch from the Dick Tracy comics that he read as a kid. The idea of personal wireless tech was in the air in various forms. However, the Star Trek connection became the popular legend. Cooper himself helped popularise it. In a 2005 documentary called How William Shatner Changed the World, he cheerfully agreed that Star Trek's communicator inspired the cell phone. Later on, he admitted he got a bit caught up in the showmanship of that story. It wasn't really Star Trek, it was Dick Tracy, he has said, trying to set the record straight. But by then, of course, the narrative of Captain Kirk inspiring the cell phone had taken on a life of its own. In truth, both the fiction and the reality worked in parallel. Star Trek gave the public and engineers like Cooper a vivid image of a future with a handheld communicator at its centre. Meanwhile, communications research provided the technical means to achieve it. Cooper's team succeeded in creating that first mobile phone prototype in 1973, and by 1983, Motorola released the first commercial cell phone, the Dynatac 8000X, which cost $4,000. From that point, cell phone technology rapidly improved and shrank. By the late 1990s, the flip phone became a cultural icon, a direct homage to the Trek communicator's flip open form. Many who owned flip phones felt like Captain Kirk, as I did, for a moment when answering a call. Even today's sleek smartphones carry the DNA of that original idea, a personal communicator you can carry anywhere. It's amazing how a TV prop from 1966 helped shape real-world tech. Martin Cooper himself often smiled about the parallel. Star Trek's communicator wasn't the only gadget to foresee the future. The show also depicted tablet-like computers, Bluetooth-style earpieces, and so much more. But it might be the most iconic example. Cooper's story shows how imagination can inspire innovation. Science fiction inspires scientists and engineers to turn fantasy into reality. As Cooper said, seeing those fictional crew members communicate through a little device made him believe people could do the same in real life. The influence of Star Trek's communicator continues to be acknowledged in pop culture and tech, even today. The Smithsonian Magazine and other retrospectives note that the first cell phone call in 1973 had a bit of Star Trek spirit behind it. The communicator itself has reappeared or been referenced on later Star Trek productions as a loving nod. For example, in newer series and even animated shows, the classic flip communicator is recognised as where it all started. So, next time you pull out your phone to make a call, remember you're holding a descendant of Captain Kirk's trusted communicator from fiction to fact. A whimsical gadget on Star Trek became the 5G-enabled, app-filled device that we all can't live without, it would seem. It's a shining example of Star Trek's optimistic tech prophecies coming true. So beam this video a like if you've been amazed by how Star Trek helped invent the cell phone. Have you ever thought about how many of today's gadgets were once seen only on sci-fi shows? Let me know in the comments which Star Trek tech you'd most like us to use in real life and why it is the transporter. And make sure to subscribe to Hailing Frequencies for more fascinating Trek trivia every week. We've only scratched the surface of Trek's influence on technology, so make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell to join us for our next deep dive into the final frontier of facts. Thank you for watching, live long and prosper, and stay tuned for the next Weekly Wave. I'm Stu Jackson, and this has been your Weekly Wave of Trek Trivia.